Oh god, we gotta fucking talk about this. Oh my god. I just finished watching this just a few minutes ago. I made it my mission to watch it tonight. And I've done it. I will say this. It's not terrible or anything like that. It's not boring. Oh, but wow, this movie goes places. Weird places. And I would just like to ask one question. How fucking high was Kevin Smith when he wrote this shit? How much fucking pot did you smoke when you wrote this shit? The climax, the reveal at the end. Okay, so in case you have not already heard, Kevin Smith's horror comedy, and that needs to be said, it's a horror comedy, so that's understandable, is about this guy, Justin Long, who plays, I actually forget his character's name. He's an asshole podcaster who's very well famous on the internet, and he's an asshole. And he goes out to Canada to interview a kid known as the Kill Bill Kid, who made a video where he was, showing off with a sword and accidentally cuts off his own leg. He's going out to Canada to interview him and kind of ridicule him on his podcast and, and get shit ton of shits and giggles out of it. Gets out there to find out that the guy killed himself. And he's pissed off about it in a bar. Just like, can't believe little fucking shithead killed himself. So I'm already feeling like, wow, yeah, this character is an asshole. And he's telling his buddy about it while he's on the phone, leaving him a message, then finds an interesting post in the bathroom about a guy who's offering room at his house, and that in exchange for living with him and helping him around the house, he will exchange stories of his life. And Justin Long is looking for something interesting to be able to put on the podcast. And so he hits him up and heads all the way out to his place, which is 2 hours out in the middle of nowhere. Goes out there and meets the guy. This is the most interesting part about this movie, as many people have said. The actor Michael Parks, who I believe it is, who plays our antagonist, who goes by the so-called name of Howard Howe, I believe is the name that he gives, which is not his real name. Because as it becomes known later, this guy apparently is a well-known serial killer. But nobody really knows who he is. And that each time he's kind of come up, he's disappeared. And so Justin goes out to his place, meets the guy. Guy seems really nice. He's also wheelchair bound. And it's very nice, very accommodating, very funny, and very intelligent, and seems to have some very interesting stories that he's more than willing to share, and has a very nice, very lavish home, and gives Justin some tea. Tea that turns out to be laced. And when he wakes up the next day, and we're given flashbacks and more character points that really just kind of show off the fact that that just kind of point more to the fact that this character is an ass. And that he's got this beautiful girlfriend who apparently he talks about to his best friend and co-host of the podcast, who's played by Haley Joel Osment. And I mean, I'll say all around, the acting all around is good. I mean, it's perfectly fine. Nobody really gives a shitty performance or anything like that. It's a very small cast. And the movie is very well shot. The movie looks very good. And a lot of the dialogue is very spot on. But nothing was ever really funny, was the thing. Anyway. So, he wakes up and he's, Justin Long has been severely numbed. And Howard explains that there was a spider that bit him and the spider was poisonous. and that his leg had swollen, Howard called the doctor, and they had to remove his leg. Well, Howard starts to kind of wise up and starts to ask, like, there was no spider, was there? I mean, you're lying to me, aren't you? And starts screaming at him, and because he's been told that there are no phones, and that his phone was destroyed when he fell, and that there was a doctor, but the doctor is off on his rounds, and that he'll talk to the doctor after they have dinner. And he knows that all of this has got to be bullshit. So he starts calling him on it, and starts screaming, and then, of course, it's revealed that Howard is not crippled. He stands up from his wheelchair, walks over to him, and smacks the shit out of him, and then starts telling him what he plans to do to him. If you're not familiar with the twist already, it's that he's been working on making a walrus suit. And he's going to put Mr. Long into a walrus suit and turn him into a walrus. Now, when I had heard about the walrus suit and it being described and all that, I pictured like he was literally wearing, you know, a like plush walrus suit, you know, with the tusks and everything. No, that's not the fact. They actually go into gory detail about what Howard does to him. That he cuts off his legs, and that he infuses his arms to his chest, so that his arms are only like this. That they're, you know, kind of like a T-Rex is how, oh god, Johnny Depp is in this movie. And it's a later reveal that he's this former detective who has been on the hunt for this serial killer, who he believes is this man. And he's been hunting him for like several years, and he believes that he has killed like 23 people, and that he's killed them in the same fashion. And dear God, he's the weirdest part about this entire movie. He plays a Chief Inspector Clouseau type with the weird, very thick, very silly French accent. And when he's revealed, he's constantly doing this thing with his eyes where it looks like he's going cross-eyed sometimes. Like he'll... Like, I can't really do it, but he just... like... This movie sometimes... I mean, the horror scenes work very well, especially when you have a very, you know, good, menacing, threatening actor like Michael Parks, who really sells this. But then when you do this weird, silly shit that's not funny, and that just doesn't work, it just really pulls you out of the movie and just really ruins it. And, oh dear God, the reveal. Okay, so we're shown how Justin's body is mutilated. And I just remembered his character's name. His character's name is Wallace. Well, his first name is Wallace. I forget what his last name is. Wallace, Walrus. You get it? Anyway. We show Howard, well, they show Howard, you know, how he's mutilating him at one point, and how Howard is even going so far as to explain a lot of his backstory on just how fucked up he is. That at the age of 10, his parents were mugged and murdered. And he was sent off to a boys' home ran by nuns and priests, and how for several years he was brutalized, he was molested, and he was raped. He saw basically the worst aspects of humanity possible. They didn't treat him like he was human. They just treated him like he was an animal or like he was an object for them to use. That goes for the boys, the nuns, the nurses, priests, and he even mentions politicians at one point. And, you know, so it's gut-wrenching, and the whole time he's explaining this, he's mutilating Wallace's body. You know, he just cut off his other leg, and the whole time Wallace is out, and he's fused his arms to the sides of his body. And then, a little later, we come to where we look like that we're in a cave of some sort, and Howard is talking, and he has named what he's turning, you know, Wallace into, that he's turning him into a walrus, and that he's named the walrus Mr. Tusk. And that's how he starts referring to him from now on, is Mr. Tusk. And tells him that if he wants to live, that he shall act like a walrus. And so, we're slowly being shown Wallace's now completely deformed body that has been turned into the shape of a walrus, which I imagine, because he's been gathering skin from a lot of his other victims who he has done this to repeatedly, and has like fused it all together all over his body, all over his legs and his back and all over the sides. And it's, you know, and it's very, you know, it's very grotesque and it's very shocking, and it's like, oh my god. And then they show the face. And this is just where it gets really fucking silly. We see Justin Long's face. You know, and yes, he is clearly in some kind, you know, of a prosthetic suit, obviously. And it looks good until you get to the face, where he's got these giant tusks, and he's got, you know, the mustaches all over, and his tongue has also been removed, so he cannot communicate. He can only bark like a walrus. And, oh man, this reveal. Oh boy, but it gets weirder. Yeah, there's the Johnny Depp cameo. He's only in the movie for maybe about 10 minutes. A lot of his stuff is not funny, it's just really awkward. He talks about how he believes that he even met the killer at one point, and the killer fooled him by pretending to be a retarded person, or like, you know, maybe a deaf person, because he, you know, he kind of talked like this, you know, like this, you know, like he was really slow and like he had a really big lisp, you know, and their scene goes on for way too long, where it's almost clear like he's trying to lure the detective into the same sort of way that he lures every other person. Only, you know, of course, it's in a different location, because obviously he's moved around a lot and killed multiple people. The detective is out there because there was a hockey player who went missing, and according to someone that he had talked to, he was drawn to an ad, and that he went out somewhere in this general location, and he was asking him if he had seen or heard anything. And this scene goes on for quite a while. It goes on for quite a few minutes, and their interaction is meant to be funny, because you have Johnny Depp, who's doing a weird, silly French accent, and then you have Michael Parks, who's, you know, he's really talking like this, and it's like really exaggerated, but it's not funny. It's really not, and it's just awkward. It's just really awkward, and the whole time I'm just going, move on. Please, for the love of God, move on. But it gets weirder than that. So Howard is talking to Wallace, or Mr. Tusk, I should say, about how he's ashamed of himself, because another part of his backstory was that after the whole orphanage thing, him being horribly abused for several years, he ran away. and escaped onto a cruise ship when he was 15 or so. And he got far away and never looked back. But the ship crashed, and they were in like the middle of Alaska or someplace with a large open sea and icebergs. And he came upon a walrus who apparently saved his life and who helped keep him warm and everything. Well, as part of his survival, at one point, which is revealed up to this point because he has quite an obsession with walruses, and he wants to turn this guy into a walrus because, you know, he loves walruses and a walrus saved his life. And he believes that walruses are, you know, far better than men because human beings are the worst creatures possible. And it's revealed that as part of his survival, while he was trapped on this rock, that he killed the walrus and ate him in order to survive. And that he's felt horribly guilty about it for several years. And it's been building up to this point where he wants to redeem himself. And so he comes at Wallace telling him that if he wants to survive and be a true walrus, he will have to kill him as a walrus. And Howard is revealed in a walrus suit, in his very own walrus suit, made from the same skin and the tusks. It's got this big open, you know, thing, so he's literally inside a prosthetic suit. He hasn't mutilated himself or anything like that. He is just inside of another walrus suit. And he comes at him, and they start walrus, you know, bumping up against each other, you know, with their shoulders, and like some walruses do, and they use, you know, their tusks, you know, to hit and stab at each other. Oh dear God, does this come off as really fucking silly, but awkwardly silly. Not funny, just awkwardly silly. Like, you're like, am I actually seeing this? Oh God, they actually went there. And so they eventually find him. They find his rental car, which has been ditched into a lake. And so the one funny bit that actually kind of made me laugh was Johnny Depp's character, you know, he says, okay, so we're very close to finding him. He pulls out a big briefcase that has guns in it. It's got like 2 pistols and a big old silver-plated shotgun. And he gives the 2 guys, the podcast co-host, Haley Joel Osment, and Wallace's girlfriend, guns. And they're both just kind of standing there, and Haley's character's he's like, these are guns. It's like, what kind of an American are you? What kind of an American are you? I mean, have you ever seen a gun? Like, I'm the kind of American who's never actually used a gun. And that was actually kind of funny. That actually kind of made me chuckle. That's the most chuckle this entire movie actually got out of me. And this is supposed to be a horror comedy. And so they get to the place. They find it when they start hearing Wallace's screams. So they get inside, and they're getting close, and Howard says, oh, your survival instincts have kicked in. You want to kill me. Well, so have mine. And he bursts out of his suit, you know, and he, you know, whips out a big, you know, like club-like looking thing. And Wallace charges at him and stabs him in the foot with his tusk, and then proceeds to just stab him in the chest until he's dead. And my camera just quit. Jesus. This camera, it sometimes likes to suddenly stop and then start re-recording, I guess, at like a 20-minute mark now. I don't know how to change it. I don't know how much was cut, so the girlfriend and the boyfriend walk in, or girlfriend and the best friend walk in, find Wallace as he is. His face is covered in blood. He is ostensibly a walrus now, and he's barking like crazy. Detective comes in and sees what he's become and considers shooting him to put him out of his misery. But they don't do it. Instead, they take him to an animal sanctuary, and it's a year later, and that's his life now, and they just pay him a visit every so often, and they feed him fish. It is a bit of a sentimental where she, where the girlfriend, because Wallace is obviously horribly ashamed about what he is now because he is just an animal who can't even communicate. And she tells him that she loves him and that she always will. And that Wallace, I guess, kind of starts bark/crying. And then they leave. And then the movie ends. I would think it would have been better and far more merciful to kill him and put him out of his fucking misery instead of keeping him alive. And the fact that he's been alive now for an additional year as a walrus. Why would you do that to him if you love him? Why would you do that? I would think it'd be worse to keep him alive. This movie, it should have picked one or the other. It should have gone for either straight horror or should have done something a little bit better with the comedy, because aside from that one bit that I talked about when Johnny Depp hands them the guns, there's like a 9mm pistol and a big old revolver. That was really the only part that actually made me chuckle. The rest of this movie just comes off as really awkward. Your main character is an asshole. He's not a horrible asshole, like to so much of an extent, like I've seen in other, slasher horrors and shit like that, where you're just thinking, please just fucking die. So it wasn't that bad. But he was pretty irritating, but then once the horrible stuff starts happening to him, and especially when he calls his girlfriend and his best friend and he's begging for help, yeah, you really do start to sympathize with him, especially as he starts going through everything and the whole process and everything. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I don't think it's a very good movie either. I'd say it's worth a rental if you want to see this shit for yourself. It's not worth owning or purchasing, though, because this should not be endorsed. I don't even fucking know what to really even think about this. A big production company was behind this. And from what I understand, this was an idea that was thought of on Kevin Smith's podcast that he just talked about as like a joke, and that he was like, dude, wouldn't it be hilarious if we did this horror comedy about a dude who gets turned into a walrus? I could see that being clever and funny if it's done right, and there are parts about this that do get it right, but then it's ruined by this weird awkwardness, and I just don't know, man. I don't know. Wow. I'm glad I watched it for myself, but man, oh man. I have not been this confused since... I don't think I've ever been this confused about anything. I was never even this confused about my own sexuality. Shit. I'm not even sure what kind of a rating to give it. Maybe a 5 out of 10? Maybe a 6 out of 10? Because it's not terrible. It's perfectly well acted, and it's very well written. It's very well directed. But man, those awkward moments, they ruin it, man. They do. I mean, sorry, I have to keep on looking up his name because I'm afraid I'm going to ruin it. Michael Parks, I mean, he's great in this. I mean, he's a great antagonist. But, man, the shit this movie does... Oof. It does kind of make me want to watch Red State to see how different that may be. Because I understand that that is also kind of a horror movie. I would think I would like to see Kevin Smith do just a straight horror movie. Like maybe a slasher type of horror movie. I don't know. But do something different with it. I don't know. Well, alright, those are finally my thoughts on the movie Tusk. A weird, awkward film. I don't think it's a piece of shit, but yeah, this is the sort of movie you're really going to turn your head at, and yeah, you are going to facepalm quite a few times, especially with those reveals. See you next time. Take care of yourselves. I have no words. Bye.